Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being on time. We're going to give it a couple more seconds to let people trickle in, and we're going to go ahead and get started.
As you're coming in, if you want to start putting any questions into the Q&A, it's never too early.
That's true.
I love questions because I discovered that I love questions because they give me a moment to just pause and breathe and let Yenting ask the question. Think.
Feel free to use the chat too to introduce yourself. We love those as well. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome. This is Apparo's Nonprofit Bites and Insights. These are our free webinar series that we have tailored specifically for nonprofit professionals like yourselves. We have expert speakers from all different industries come to share their knowledge, expertise, and insights with us. So today is the second of a three-part series around marketing strategies for nonprofits. If you were able to attend last week, welcome back. Glad to have you. If you were unable to attend, I do recommend that you take a look at the recording. I will be dropping that link into the chat in a moment, but that recording has some great high-level tips around marketing, around nonprofit marketing. Today, we are going to be doing a deeper dive into marketing, specifically around your volunteer-related goals. So we have the amazing Bleema coming back to lead this conversation, and we also have our volunteer manager, Sarah Friday, with us today as well. But before I turn it over to them, let's go over the housekeeping items. So all of our webinars are recorded and are posted onto our website as well as our YouTube channel. All of you who attend live receive a follow-up email from me. It'll include the direct link to the recording, so you don't need to search for it, as well as a slide deck and any resources we might talk about today. Q&A box and chat box are available for you to use. As Bleema shared, go ahead, drop in your questions into the Q&A at any time. Chat box is also available for you to use. This is a great space to provide some feedback, make comments, share your own experiences. So please feel free to use those tools. For those of you who might be new or newer to Apparo, just a little bit about us. So our mission is to help other nonprofits with anything technology related. So as you can see, we offer a wide range of services, and this is meant to help make sure we're meeting the needs of the nonprofit. So any technology challenges, barriers, that sort of thing, come talk to us and we'll make sure we match you with the right service. If you'd like to learn more, go to our website at apparo.org, and it lists out all the different kinds of services. It also has a space for you to submit your requests. If or when you decide you'd like to access our services, this is the best way to start. Feel free to also subscribe to our email list. This is a way to stay updated on our programming. You'll also have my email address. I'm happy to support and make sure you get connected to the right person. And then finally, if you like what we do, consider writing a short Google review. All right, that is it from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, put myself on mute, and turn it over to Bleema and Sarah.
Thank you. Just one moment here. I'll get it organized. Okay, does that look right? Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Yenting, for having me again, and Sarah for joining me as the volunteer manager at Apparo. I really appreciate your perspective. So interrupt me, disagree with me, share an extra example, whatever you like. And as I said at the beginning, and Yenting said, I do want to, if there are questions that you have, please do put them in the chat or in the Q&A. I want to deliver as much actionable advice as I can. And you have specifics going on in your organization that are hard to address at a high level. So ask them in the chat and maybe we can talk about them. Some great questions came a week ago that led to some changes in this presentation that you haven't seen, Sarah. So surprises to come. So if you did participate in the marketing overview, you're going to see a week ago, you'll see this is a similar structure. It's a little bit different, but all the examples and the deep dive that we're doing is going to focus on volunteers, how you're attracting them, how you're interacting with them, how you're retaining them. And as we go through this list, I'll do a quick overview. You may already be doing a lot of these things and not categorize this as marketing per se, but it's marketing and it's something that you may be doing on your own or with a marketing team. And either way is great. So we're going to start with talking about deepening insights. You already know a lot about your volunteers and those people who you wish you're volunteers, but we'll talk more about the importance of learning even more and how to go about it. Segmenting volunteers. Yes, you can apply the same strategies to meet your goals, and we're going to talk about goals across your current and potential volunteers, but segmentation makes you more strategic and effective. When we talk about fine-tuning the volunteer experience, as you deepen your insights and gain insights, you'll get advice from people. You should try this. You should try that. Some of the ideas will be really good. Some of them are going to be terrible, and there are going to be things you're not able to do, but hopefully you'll get some really good ones. Building a foundation. So as before you do your marketing, you want to make sure you have an audience for it and content. So we're going to talk about building an audience, building content. Then you're going to choose the channels that you're marketing in to attract volunteers and also to retain them, and optimizing your use of those channels. Copywriting, that's the language you use to explain what you need to motivate your current and your potential volunteers. The goods are the physical marketing stuff you need out when you're out in the world or virtually attracting volunteers. And then we'll talk about measuring outcomes. So everything we talk about today is about marketing to help you achieve your volunteer related goals. So speaking of goals, before you potentially waste time going down the wrong path, make sure your goals are clear and well communicated to whomever needs to know them. And Sarah, I'm going to go through this, but maybe you have some volunteer specific goals for Apparo that you would share as examples too.
Sure.
So attracting volunteers of a certain type or skill set. I mean, it's possible that you have many volunteers of one kind and you need a certain kind. That could be a goal. Encouraging volunteers to grow or change their roles. Maybe you have a lot of volunteers at like your entry level and you need them in order to expand your ability to serve. You really need volunteers to move into larger leadership roles. Retention is a big issue, right? It's hard to keep attracting volunteers and training them. So keeping them is important. Maybe you have some type of goals around keeping volunteers for a certain period of time, or the average number of times a volunteer volunteers with you. Cultivating your volunteers. So you have a relationship with them. Can you have a deeper relationship? Can they become advocates, spreading the word about volunteering with you? Can they become donors and so forth? So these are some examples of goals. I don't know if Sarah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you have any others or agree with these.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest ones for Apparo, since we do skilled volunteering and we have processes and frameworks that work really well for us and how we relate to our nonprofit partners, retaining those skilled volunteers, encouraging them and making them feel really valued to come back and volunteer with us again so that we have folks that are really plugged into the way that we do things. Marketing helps us achieve those goals in many ways. So I will agree with all of these very much.
Perfect. And we're going to talk about honoring volunteers and how we do that. It's a really important part of retaining them because constantly attracting them is very hard work. So once you feel confident about your goals, think about whether you can put numbers around them and share that as broadly as appropriate. And we're going to come back to these goals at the end when we talk about measuring outcomes. So with your goals established, you're ready to focus on the 8 ways that marketing can help fulfill them. So I'm talking about deepening insights first because I think it's really important. When it comes to recruiting, managing, retaining your volunteers, a lot of the work you do is probably a mix of things you've actually learned and some assumptions that you're making. And it's probably working well because you know a lot about your volunteers. But I really believe that if you can deepen your knowledge of your current and potential volunteers, you can be more strategic in the way that you work and you can gain some efficiencies. So I would say first, think about, and again, Sarah, I'll take your thoughts here. Think about which perspectives would be useful. Here are some examples, and yours might be different, but in terms of your current volunteers, you may want to consider getting some perspective from those who are brand new to you, and those who've been with you for a long time. They can share very different insights. Now, talking to former volunteers may feel like a little yucky, like they left me, I don't know why, they ghosted me, they're not responsive. But in terms of fine-tuning your programming, what a wealth of knowledge of ideas they could potentially be if you can connect and have those conversations. And what is a potential volunteer? A potential volunteer is someone who meets your volunteer criteria and you want them to be volunteering with you, but they haven't for some reason. And learning why they haven't could be very, very useful. So you may have other categories. Like, for example, Sarah had said before, sometimes we need a certain skill set. Would you have any other subsets, Sarah?
Um, no, I don't think so.
Okay, great. So let's talk about next what would be amazing to know from each of these audiences. And we'll work on writing like a wish list of insights. And then we'll talk about how to actually collect the insights. So I think the fun part to me is putting together my wish list. Like, here's everything I want to know. And then the hard work is actually gathering those insights. But let's talk about the fun part first. So I'm not going to read every single question here, but what would be great to know from your newer volunteers? And you'll be able to tell as we go through these different question lists, we're fishing for information that's going to help inform the language we use, the channels we choose. Are there tweaks that we can make to our programming? We're not asking a lot of questions just for the sake of asking them. And you'll also notice some of these questions are deep. They're not questions that you'll just be able to add to a survey. Some of them you will. Some of them will be obvious that I can just pop this into an existing survey as a multiple choice question. I can create an open-ended question in a survey. So some of them are this and that, but we'll go through the wish list first and then talk about some strategies. So some of the examples I have at the top here, I think can help inform your language. So as you get answers to these questions and you hear what people are saying is motivating them or what reservations they had to overcome or their expectations, you'll start to hear keywords, phrases that you'll want to reflect in your marketing communications. And there may be just some like communication opportunities here. So if you're finding that a lot of people are saying that things are not really meeting their expectations, you may not be describing your volunteer program clearly. Or if you're hearing a lot of people were very worried, like, oh, I might not have the right skills for this. You just might need some more clarity around it. And then channels. Asking questions about how volunteers found your nonprofit is really important for getting feedback on whether you're investing your time and your money in the right channels. So if you hear, oh, yeah, I saw that thing on LinkedIn you did. I saw that thing on LinkedIn you did. I saw that thing on LinkedIn you did over and over again. Well, gosh, that's a great place to invest your time and potentially your money if you want to consider paid advertising. If year after year you've been going to a particular event and paying to have a table and you don't hear anyone making any commentary about that, it's probably not worth your time. And I do think it's important to also ask in general how they learn about volunteer opportunities. You have your ways you've been doing it, and they may have some new ideas. And then asking them about their distinguishing characteristics, and you probably do some of this already, may also help you figure out where to find them and what channels to use. So for example, if you discover that a lot of your volunteers work in the same industry, like consulting or technology or banking, all this should sound very familiar in Charlotte, you may want to reach out to a local professional organization and try to get in front of them to pitch volunteering with you. So that's in terms of your newer volunteers. I'll talk about your longer term volunteers next. Of course, you can ask your longer volunteer term volunteers, anything you asked new volunteers. I didn't repeat those questions here, but they may not remember. It may have been a while since they were first learning about you. And also they have, I think, deeper, richer insight because they have deeper, richer relationship with you. So we can think about the language type questions. What impact does volunteering with you have on them? What motivates them to keep coming back? That's, again, language you're going to want to reflect in your marketing communications. Do they have any ideas for improving the volunteer experience? I don't think it's worth asking any of the new volunteers this yet. They probably haven't engaged with you enough, but your existing volunteers, hopefully they probably have some crazy ideas, but they may have some really good ones. And then Sarah mentioned this before, how do they feel about the way you honor your volunteers? Sorry, my dog is barking. I hope you don't all hear it. How do they feel about the way you honor your volunteers? Are you investing in big events that they don't care about? There's a lot of really affordable ways to honor your volunteers, and we will talk about that. That may deliver better bang for the buck than the way you're doing it, or maybe you're doing it perfectly. So I think it's great to ask about that. So I'm going to move on to talking about that potentially yucky one.
We do have a question
Yeah,
before you move on. I like this question. How can you ensure people will respond honestly rather than just being overly polite or just saying what they think we want to hear?
Nice. So in one-on-one conversations and in focus groups, and we'll talk about different strategies for collecting information, sorry. I think you can ask them. So if you are, because you're asking this question, I'm wondering if you may need some one-on-one conversations to dive into things that are more sensitive. I find in our surveys that people tend to be honest, don't you? I mean, Yenting and Sarah, you both look at surveys. We do get some bad reviews, and I think it's because the work that we're doing is not super sensitive. It's hard in a survey to tell people to be honest. And I think if you are facing that, you're finding that people are kind of just blowing smoke, that you may need to do some one-on-one interviews and look people in the eye, even virtually, and dig a bit. It takes a lot more time to do that, but it is really hard. I mean, what you're asking, it is really hard in a survey.
Emma brought up a good point. Emma Lyons in the chat. Anonymous surveys too. If you have the option for them to either forego sharing their information, then they may be more inclined to be honest about feedback.
Yeah, and it could, if you're concerned in a particular area, you may be able to phrase your questions a little bit differently or use open-ended questions instead of multiple choice. You keep getting really high ratings, but you have a feeling something could be better, maybe an open-ended question, and make it mandatory. And people may just write one word or NA, but you may get something out of that. I hope you would.
There's a comment around volunteer orientation as maybe a space for feedback as well.
Yes, absolutely. So here I'm working on like building that wish list of questions, and then we're definitely going to talk about finding those touch points to ask the questions is coming up. So I'll move I'll move a little bit faster through some of these questions. So the former volunteers, again, it may feel yucky, but they could really potentially give you great feedback on tweaks that you might need to make. So asking them about why they're not volunteering with you anymore. Maybe there was a gap between what they expected and what you delivered. That could be something you might consider fine-tuning in your program or not. And that may also just be a communications challenge. And ask them if they have any recommendations, why they're volunteering with others. I think there's a potential to learn a lot here. Potential volunteers, and you're going to have to think creatively about how to get in front of them. And we're going to talk, like I said, after we build our wish list of questions about how to get in front of them. But I do think it's worth the effort. It's potentially they just haven't heard about you, but it could be some type of a communications disconnect. They think it's one thing and volunteering with you is actually quite something else. Or maybe there are some small tweaks you could make to appeal to them. So here are some thoughts about questions that you can ask them. Have they considered volunteering with you? Why or why not? Now that they know about you, because once you've probably told them a little bit about you as you're having this conversation, what's appealing, what isn't, why are they volunteering with others? And then it can also help inform your channels. How did they learn about other volunteer opportunities? And then we talked about the use of those distinguishing characteristics could help you identify events or professional organizations, or maybe even companies that you could get in front of, clubs, etc. So when you have this wish list of things you want to know, the fun part's over and the work begins. But chances are some of this information hopefully is already being collected in your nonprofit, or you have processes in place to collect it, like surveys and so forth. But I would start by considering what might be hiding in plain sight in your organization. Talk to your staff who work with volunteers and try to extract these insights. Share, create your wish list and share it with them. They may have this information in their brains and it may not be documented anywhere. Take a look at your volunteer impact, your intake forms, your satisfaction surveys, any type of engagement tracking that you're doing to try to see, do I already have some of these answers? Pull it together. And then you're going to see there's going to be knowledge gaps. If you work hard on putting together a wish list of questions, there's going to be a lot of questions left, but you'll have clarity on what those are and plan to fill those gaps. So hopefully you have some processes in place that you can build into your existing processes. So for example, if you do have a volunteer intake process or you do have surveys, maybe you already have some questions that you can play around with. We tend to ask a lot in multiple choice because it allows us to consolidate data over time. And that's very important to be able to track things over time. However, switching a question or adding a question to an open-ended question and making it mandatory, because people love to skip open-ended questions, just have one in there that allows people to talk about how they feel about you. How has your experience been? How would you describe volunteering with us to a friend who asked, and see what words they're using. And perhaps if you already have some multiple choice questions, you could just like sneak in another, like if you have a question related to demographics, maybe you ask a couple more that you squeeze in there. And then as someone mentioned in the chat, assess your touch points, like your orientation, your training. Maybe you have regular check-ins with your volunteers or when they come in actually to volunteer. And any of this really could happen virtually or physically. These can be quick conversations. Collecting data you don't always have to have a million responders and have it be very quantitative. A lot of this can be qualitative. These can be hallway chats. But if you want to go more quantitative, if you do have people coming into your facility, we've had good luck just putting QR codes into frames. Please do a 3-question survey. And people love prizes, and prizes it can just be honoring them. This month, the first however many people to do the survey, we're randomly going to choose one and do a social media post just to honor you as the volunteer of the month. That's a great way to just get people to do a survey. And then if you don't have processes in place to answer all of your questions, which you won't, most likely, you're going to have some of those deep dive questions you want, then it becomes a question of, can I bring people together for focus groups? Can I bring them together? Or can I create the bandwidth to do one-on-one interviews, because they take time? But, as to that other question in the chat, one-on-one interviews are how you really dig. And you can do it a bit in focus groups too, just depending on how sensitive the work you do is. But focus groups in general work when it's not super sensitive, and when it's not super sensitive, and when the people are not incredibly high level executives, super busy. Because if it's very sensitive or people are very busy, you're going to have to do one-on-one interviews. In terms of potential volunteers, where you really do need to think creatively about how to reach them, hopefully you have some insights into organizations that might let you go talk and pitch in front of them because you know that they match your characteristics once you've gathered some insights. But I would say this, because you don't know what you're going to get, you don't know these people. They're your potential volunteers. I would not invest time in trying to bring them together in a focus group or to spend time doing interviews with them. I would strictly focus on a survey. See if you can get in front of a group and then do a survey afterwards. And again, motivate with some type of a win. For these people, you can't honor them as a volunteer of the whatever, but if you can have some type of a gift card, I mean, people get motivated by a $5 Starbucks gift card. People like to win things. So I would say if you can get in front of a group and speak to them and pitch that, but you can also do this broadly in social media. And we're going to talk about building your social media base, but you can also do it in social media. Haven't volunteered with us before? We'd love to talk to you. Please do this 5-question survey and win something. So these insights are really fundamental to everything that follows in this presentation. They make it possible for us to improve the impact of our outreach through segmentation, through language, and the rest. So I'm going to move on to
Bleema,
talking about
before you move
segmentation.
on,
Yeah, yep.
and you might actually answer this in the segmentation portion, but we do have a question around, other than the basic demographics, could you recommend some good question that will ensure a good mix or dynamic of volunteers in the group?
Yes. So I'm not sure if they're asking for a good mix for your volunteer recruiting, because I'm not sure what you're recruiting for, but for insights that are actionable, I would make sure to think about asking around career. And it may be tricky, depending on your folks, it may be tricky to ask age, but you could ask how many years they've been in the career or what year they graduated high school or college to kind of try to get a read on that. If that can help. Sarah, help me out. Are there other things that we find useful for either having a mix of volunteers as you're recruiting them?
Well, again, skilled volunteering for us, knowing their skill set. If we need folks that are strong in a certain area, highlighting some of those key skill sets in surveys or intake forms that they can choose what they have experience in, that really helps us then assign people to where we need them.
Right. And so Sarah's area of focus, because she's focused on recruiting and retaining them, would be a little different than mine here, where I would be thinking about what can I know about them so I can figure out how to find them. And that's what I would be looking at. And so knowing where they work or what their career is might help me find a professional organization. Or if I realize a lot of people are working for a certain company, I want to get in front of that company. Or I know that I have a lot of retirees. There might be a club that I want to try to get in front of and reach them that way. Knowing what social media channels they use is another one, because that's a spot where I would invest my efforts. So I hope that that's helpful. I wasn't exactly sure of the direction of the
Yeah, I
question.
think you answered that perfectly. They just kind of expanded that they need people from different walks of life, like corporations, everyday, nonprofit, etc.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, there is another question that's coming in, but it's around segmentation. So I'm going to pause and let you present on this part, and then we'll have that question for you.
Okay, could I hear the question first?
Sure.
Just so I'll keep
How
it
do
in
you,
mind.
absolutely. So how do you segment a STEM education nonprofit? What do we look, what should we look for when doing it as far as volunteers are concerned?
Okay, great. So I think that this will be applicable regardless. And I tried really hard to make this presentation applicable regardless of the type of nonprofit you have and your volunteer needs. But let's come back to that. If you feel like it wasn't addressed, I am sorry, I don't see the chat or the Q&A. So segmenting means to categorize or group together people who are alike in ways that are meaningful, in ways that you can act upon to meet your goals. It matters because treating everyone in the exact same way, it can work, but it's not optimally efficient in terms of achieving your goals. So I'm going to give an example. And Sarah, if you don't like my example, we could do a different example. But let's say that, we talked about the importance of retention and how keeping your existing volunteers moving saves you from constantly having new ones. So let's say that you have a goal of increasing the average number of times that anyone volunteers with you by 20%. So very quantitative goal. You could do one campaign to reach all of your existing volunteers with the same email, the same language, the same social media posts saying volunteer with us again, in the same way. But hopefully, as you are gathering your insights, you discover that volunteers have distinct characteristics and distinct motivators. And I'm going to give an example. And again, this is like a very high level example. And it certainly could be applicable to a STEM related nonprofit. I hope it's applicable across the board. So for example, let's say that you discover you have high school students and they volunteer with you because your service hour, it's so convenient for them to get service hours for high school that they need, and they love TikTok. And then you have college students and they appreciate so much how good volunteering with you looks on their resume, and you can find them on Instagram. And then you have young professionals. What they love is that when they come on site to volunteer with you, there are other young professionals and you've built in time to give them networking in some way. And you can find them on LinkedIn because they're very career focused. And then you have a contingent of retirees who genuinely love making a meaningful impact. They connect with your constituents so much, that's the reason that they volunteer with you. And they're not very active on social media, but they're very active in some local clubs. So these are 4 different ones, and every one of these segments has a different motivation, can be reached differently. So optimally, you'd want to tweak your marketing. These are technically good segments because they're definable. You can understand how they're different. You can set goals for them differently, and they're actionable. There are ways to reach them differently. So when it comes to segments, one of the things you might want to tweak are actually elements of the volunteer program itself for them. So again, this is based on hopefully insights that you got as you were gathering insights, or based on data that you already collect. And the first 4 here are really volunteer program fundamentals. And some of these may be non-starters for you, but if you're hearing over and over again that your time commitment is too intensive, is there a way to be flexible? Can you do a day of service instead of several weeks of a commitment? That's something we hear at Apparo a lot. Are they telling you that they need to hear from you more often? Is there an opportunity? Is there maybe another communication that your organization is already creating, like some type of maybe your executive director is already creating a monthly update for the board? Could you share that more broadly with all of your volunteers? For example, if you're hearing, I'd love to hear from you more. Your training experience, if they're telling you they're not getting enough in training, training can be intimidating, but we've been using Canva presenter videos. I think Sarah's maybe getting ready to create one, as training videos, and we've gotten really good feedback. They're easy to create, and then people can watch them on their own time. And then maybe, as I mentioned it before, like there may be some tweaks you can make. Maybe you've only always pitched individual volunteer opportunities, but you hear that they really want to come with their friends, or they really like to come with their coworkers. So are there some ways that you could tweak it for them? The next part is, and Sarah referenced this at the beginning, is how you make your volunteers feel great. This is about retention, how you honor them, how you ensure that they know that they are integral to your impact. So if they are telling you they want more attention, or you have a sense that you want to do more, there really are a lot of very affordable ways to do that. At Apparo, we post every volunteer engagement gets a social media post at the beginning and at the end. And well, because these are longer term engagements, and we tag all of our volunteers, and it helps build our audience, as we'll talk later about building your audience. So it's social media is one very affordable idea. If you have an event, having just a slideshow that shows pictures of your volunteers in action makes them feel great to see themselves. if you have volunteers physically, and you can do screenshots from virtual meetings too. People just like to see their face. If you have a place where volunteers are coming physically, just having a list up. Thank you to our 2023 volunteers. If appropriate for your nonprofit, perhaps the people that they serve could share a quote, a card, if big, maybe a video. We've done this before. Sarah, we did this with the Mission Possible Award program, and every nonprofit that participated in that program had a little, just a 30-second, a little 30-second thank you to, yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, the points that Bleema is highlighting on, reiterating the importance between volunteer manager and marketing. I think that's what I want to touch on. Her and her team, so many great ideas of different ways that we can highlight and make our volunteers feel special. We implemented a volunteer award a couple of years ago, and it was marketing's recommendation. And it has been so fun to allow our nonprofit partners to recommend volunteers and provide them with a physical award. It just makes them feel special. So definitely tap into your marketing team, really dig in with them to see what ideas they have, different ways to make your volunteers feel special. And again, focusing on that retention and wanting them to continue to volunteer with you. It's a really important relationship. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm guessing that we may have some folks watching who don't have a marketing team. So do not despair, because all we do is just think creatively, right? It becomes an issue of bandwidth. You can think creatively and think strategically. It's just finding the time to do it if you don't have the marketing team. But thank you, Sarah, for that. And then, you're going to want to tailor. Oh, so honors and celebrations, events, swag. We had a little conversation about swag before, and is it a week ago, like, is it really worth it? And I do think it's worth it if it builds advocacy. If people are proud to take that thing around and show it to other people, I wouldn't invest a lot in it. Sarah, would you agree, disagree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And thinking about, the cost of those items against the volunteer time commitment and what that looks like. So yeah, absolutely.
And I would say tailor it to your segments as much as possible. Maybe you hear from the retirees that other nonprofits get us together for breakfast sometimes. Maybe there is a little bit of an expense, but maybe an annual or a breakfast celebration would be really great for your retiree audience if you hear that for them. Whereas your young professionals might really love an award that has an actual name that they can put on their LinkedIn, or a LinkedIn reference. I know we do some things for some of our volunteers on LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you describe what that is, Sarah?
Yeah, we'll do recommendations. So there's a place on LinkedIn that you can write something about that person. So if you have standout volunteers, again, young professionals, this is a great place to do that, just to highlight publicly the commitment, the work that they've done, and giving them that praise.
Yeah, and I know that our volunteers typically use their workplace skills. However, I think that this could really be applicable across the board, just bolstering that someone is reliable and kind. I think it probably goes a long way. So another thing that you can plan for are the channels that you're going to use to reach these audiences. But first, there are steps that you can take to set yourself up for success with those channels. So having an audience and having content is critical. So let's talk about growing your audience. One, engaging on social media is not just something for the marketing team to do in a nonprofit. It's for everyone to do in a nonprofit. If someone wasn't tagged in the main post by whoever made the post, you can tag in the comments. That engages people. We also invite our contacts to follow on LinkedIn, which is what this first little graphic is. It's a little small, but you have to be an admin. So we literally at Apparo take turns. I make different people be the admin, and then you can invite 250 of your contacts per month to follow you. That really helps build a LinkedIn audience. And even if your nonprofit is not doing something professional, LinkedIn is still a great place to communicate. Encourage advocacy from your board members. They're also volunteers and other key volunteers. Sometimes you just have to ask. And advocacy can mean engaging on social media. Sometimes what I will do at a board meeting is take a link to a social media post and just put it up in the presentation or have a QR code basically to it and literally take a moment. Could everyone please look at this post and share it? It just shows them how easy it is. And then I can show them what's happened to the reach of that post just by taking that simple action. It really brings that to life for the board. Other advocacy is talking to others about you, opening doors to speaking opportunities where they work, at clubs they belong to. And even if you trust them enough to make them an admin on LinkedIn, they can also invite their contacts. Building an email list. So at the beginning of this presentation, Yenting said, here are some of the ways you can engage with us. And she showed you subscribe. I am like the subscribe police. If you have a form, if you have a presentation, please be asking people to subscribe. Every time you can, make it as mandatory as you can so that you grow those lists, so that you have more people that you can communicate with. In terms of creating content, do those one-on-one interviews as you can, or introduce your marketing team to do them. Ask the open-ended questions, get the stories, get the quotes, get the testimonials so that you can use them. And don't put pressure on yourself to write like a long story. One great quote you can use on social media, you can put on your website. I'm also the photo police. Take a photo. And if there's no picture, it didn't happen. So, and it's okay if it's a screenshot. It's fine. If that's how your volunteers are engaging, great. Photos, photos, photos. And I'll add to this list, gather praise from as appropriate for your nonprofit, gather praise from the constituents who receive support. You can use that to honor your volunteers. So having this foundation in place and bolstering it continuously. This is like all marketing. There's no one and done. It'll help build your confidence as you build your channel strategy. So in terms of channels, keep your segments in mind if you've broken your audience up a bit, and keep all your insights and your findings in mind. So obviously, in terms of digital social media, you have a plethora of options. What we find at Apparo to be to work well is we share stories, and they can be very short, of volunteer impact. This is what's happening. Here's a picture, here's some people tagged, and then we have a call to action, which is you're just asking someone to do something. Here's the picture. Thank you so much. Do you want to learn about volunteering? That works very well. And it's a double win because it makes the volunteer who volunteered feel really good. So it helps with retention. And then it's also attracting new volunteers. So that same strategy works. It works well in social media, but it can also work if you decide to invest in a paid article in in Charlotte Observer. You can use that same strategy. You can use that same strategy in an email newsletter. Also in social media, again, if you hear over and over again, people are hearing from you in a certain channel, you could consider paid ads. You can start with a small amount of money and try it. Just make sure you're tracking your results so you know your investment is paying off. That could work well if you have just a really great story to share, or if you have a really deep emotional need for volunteers. That may be someplace you want to invest. And don't forget about groups in LinkedIn and Facebook. I get made fun of by my kids for the time that I spend on Facebook. And the reason that I still do it is because of the groups. I say to them, like, how do you find groups of like-minded people? Like, that's where I find the groups. And if as you're learning about the characteristics of the people you want to attract to be volunteers, posting in groups is a very powerful way to find them. There's less noise in the groups, and people tend to respect each other a little bit more, just because not always they tend, but in general, I would say they do, because they came together for a certain interest. I mentioned email a little bit before, but I'll add that sometimes you can just ask another organization, either another nonprofit, a professional organization, would they send an email on your behalf, a call for volunteers, or would they actually share their list with you? Sometimes it doesn't hurt to ask. We've had people do it for us, and then we do it back to them. If you do get those names, you may, in your email campaign, want to consider tagging those who've actually volunteered with you, so that you can tailor your language a little bit differently. This is big, and we don't do it, but if you're very sophisticated around your segmentation, you could also do that on your email list and note that this is a retiree, this is a high school student, and so forth, and even tailor your language to that extent. And I'm saying it, but we don't do it. It's extreme, but if you've got the data, I would absolutely use it. Google Nonprofit Ad Grant, and we do have content about this. In Google Nonprofit Ad Grant, you can take advantage of free money to use for ads to recruit volunteers. And you could, if you have, once you have it set up and going, having multiple ads, you could have an ad that's very appealing to high school students. You could have one that appeals to the retirees and so forth. And it is complicated to set up Google Nonprofit Ad Grant. I don't want to make it seem like it's simple, but if you do have the bandwidth to go down that path, it could be very powerful. So I'll move on to in-person channels. So finding the right events to attend is a very important part of volunteer marketing, getting in front of your target segments of potential volunteers. Hopefully, as you gather insights, you know events that they go to, and maybe you can get a speaking opportunity to a club, a professional organization, or a company to pitch. I know you've had opportunities to do that, Sarah, right?
Yes. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
who typically opens the door for those for you? Who makes the introduction, or do you just ask?
Typically just ask. Conversations with volunteers, they may mention that there's an event coming up with different nonprofits or different partners. So yeah, I just jump on those. But creating connections and deepening those conversations, I think to dive in to see where you can get out there is important too.
Yeah. And I do that, the just ask piece, I think consistently. It's a very important part of marketing. You'll be, and especially as nonprofit marketers, we have good intent, right? Ultimately, our mission is our intent. So when we're asking for support and a favor, it's not really a favor, right? Everyone benefits from volunteering also, or they wouldn't do it. So as we talked about before, easy service hours, feeling great, networking, all of those things. Okay. So I would also say fish in your own pond. So pitch volunteering at your own events, and any event can work. A quick pitch, a slide, a QR code on the table, and events to celebrate current volunteers can also be good recruiting events if you have the bandwidth to allow a volunteer to bring a friend who might be interested in volunteering, a volunteer celebration type event if you're having them. People are also a channel. They're human beings, but I mean, we talked about people as advocates. Media is another one. So if you're gathering your volunteers, consider if you can write a media alert and let people know that something special is going on, or maybe something really interesting is happening, even if it's not an event per se that press are going to want to come to. They may want to interview based on what's going on in the year. So you may want to pitch a story. Let's say you have a couple, right, who are dating or married, who are volunteering together. What a lovely Valentine's story that could be in a publication. Pitch it. Maybe you have a mother and child who are volunteering together. What a lovely Mother's Day story that could be. Pitch it. So we talked about asking people to advocate for you. Definitely ask, and ask other organizations to spread the word that for you, and do it back for them if you can. Calls for volunteers, for volunteer opportunities, multiple ones can work together if there's not a huge conflict. And so once you've thought through the channels you'd like to use, considering when to use them is the next step. So thinking, what's the ideal timing in each channel? You want to make sure you have channel synergy. So if channels can really complement each other very nicely if you have the bandwidth to do this, If you have one look and one graphic that you're using in email, can you use it also in social media at the same time? It's important to coordinate across your nonprofit. As your bandwidth is thin, you're all using and sharing the same channels. At Apparo, we keep track in a spreadsheet. So we just kind of know what's going on, especially in email, that we're not bombarding our audiences too much. And it's a question: how much is too much? How frequent of a call for volunteers is too frequent? Sarah, do you have an opinion on what good timing is for if you're reaching out to the same audience for come back and volunteer with us again?
Yeah, I think to your point, just making sure that it doesn't run up against other asks to subscribe, attend an event. Um, we do a lot of individual outreach to volunteers, and it's a little different. But just again, making sure that it's not too much of an ask. Our engagements are quite long, so if someone just wraps up an engagement, I won't plan to ping them that next day to join another. Giving a little break in that ask time is important.
Yeah, and that falls right into like those behavior-based triggers. So you're saying they just did
Yeah.
one thing, give them some time. There
Right.
may be some other things they do that are not volunteer things, but maybe they came to another event, not volunteer related, or maybe they made a donation. That might be a nice time to build in an ask around volunteering very subtly, very softly, especially if they just made a donation, thanking them and saying, hey, there are other ways to engage with us if you'd like. Very soft. Don't get your fundraising people upset. So once you've planned the channels you'll use, you can consider the language you want to use in them. So optimizing language is a really great way to get bang for the buck because it's just writing, right? So everyday channels like your website, your printed brochures, they need to have broad appeal. Chances are you're not going to have a website page just for high school student volunteers, another website page just for retirees. If you do, good for you. We do not. So when you think about building broad appeal, you can think about everything that you learned and you heard. You can have bullet lists that hit on keywords that are appealing to multiple types of volunteers. You could use a testimonial, and people will be attracted to the testimonial from the type of person that speaks to them. And I think it's important when you're at this broad level to weave together heartstrings and metrics. Some people are really motivated by hearing that emotional story, and some people are motivated by metrics. So assess how you're using your language across communication channels. It is important to have one consistent brand voice, sort of a tone, a personality, the way that you speak, but it doesn't mean you have to use every channel exactly the same way. So if you're promoting volunteering in Instagram Reels, you can have a little bit more fun with it. Show the real side. And of course, this is if it's appropriate for your nonprofit. Whereas if you are printing a brochure, you probably want to be more professional. Consider how to fine tune to meet your goal. So you want to use a really strong call to action. I used that phrase before. A call to action is just what you're asking a person to do. I want you to click here to apply to volunteer, or I want you to click here to register for the info session. You want to make sure it's very, very direct and that you're literally taking them to where you need to take them. No extra links, no rabbit holes. We include call to action. Every time we make a post, we have a call to action. And so you want to just keep that really simple. You want to weave in the keywords, and you're going to hear a lot as if you're doing interviews and you're being really thoughtful about gathering insights. You'll hear social impact and social good and lifting lives. And then you'll wonder, I got a lot of phrases here. So Google Keyword Planner, even if you don't use Google Ads, you can use Google Keyword Planner to test some of these phrases and see if people really search them. And that will help with your search engine optimization. So play around with it. It's a very easy tool to use. And if you need some help with it, let me know and we can talk about that. And tailor it as much as you can to what you've heard about your segments for those places that you can. So if you're attending an event for high school students, you know what's a priority to them, for example. Or if you're making a corporate presentation, tailor it as much as you can. So that works, if you're doing a flyer for that event or a presentation. So as you're working on fine-tuning your language and your benefits, when you're out in the world, you need stuff. And actually this is for the digital and the physical world. And this is, we talked about this a little bit last time too. I'm going to do a plug because your website is one of those tools, and Apparo does have a free website user experience assessment. Skilled volunteers can review your website from a volunteer perspective. As a new volunteer, you get great potential volunteer perspective from them. Most likely they haven't volunteered with you. We can certainly make sure they haven't, and you can get feedback on the volunteer experience on your website, but across your whole website. So learn more there. And you need those website pages that are volunteer facing to lead people to. I get asked sometimes, like, I need a flyer for this, I need a flyer for this. I'm like, we have a great volunteer page on our website. Just send them to that. Email templates and presentation templates. The word template sometimes can sound intimidating, but it really can be just an email that you've saved in your inbox and a presentation that you've saved that you use over and over again. And it helps make sure that you, for things that you do a lot. So it helps you optimize your language, and it just makes things easy for you for regular volunteer related communication. For an onboarding email, an email about new opportunities, or a presentation template. So it becomes, it's branded correctly. You know you're using the right fonts, you have the right logo. So if you're about to do a presentation to pitch recruiting to an organization, you can just customize it really quickly for them instead of scrambling. It helps you look more professional and more polished. One-pagers are great in the physical and the digital world. There's a picture here of our volunteer spotlight. So we write spotlights. We interview some of our volunteers who've worked with us for a long time. We try to do one of these a month-ish. Volunteer Appreciation Month in April is coming up. It's a great time to start publishing some of these. And these one-pagers we create in Canva. They are embeddable into our website, which is why we use them a lot, because it's a great, easy way to create content, and our volunteers love them and they share them on social media. And of course, there's just items you need for going to meetings and so forth, and having those ready and organized. I mean, it takes time and money to invest and get these organized, but if you have the bandwidth to do it or the budget to outsource it, it just makes your life easier, and it makes you look professional and ready to go. Another really important and final marketing detail is less fun, but very important. It's measuring your outcomes. And you need to do this because, there's no rest in marketing. You try something, you learn, and you tweak it for next time. You want to measure your success, especially when you're investing money, but also when you're investing time. And what metrics are relevant based on the goals that you set. Google Analytics is fantastic. I know we have some educational content around Google Analytics. I can help if you need some more. Google Analytics can tell you where your traffic is coming from. So if you've invested in certain channels, time or money, you can see that they're paying off. I have an example on the bottom of something called a UTM, which I said the wrong definition for. It stands for Erkin Tracking Module. Who knew? So Erkin is some software company that Google bought. And so UTMs are named in their honor. But you want to use those if you have multiple initiatives going on in the same other channel. So let's say you're doing something in Charlotte Observer. If you're just doing one thing, you can watch your traffic in Google Analytics coming in from Charlotte Observer. But if you're doing an ad and 2 different articles, then you're going to want to have different links so that you can track those. And then Google Analytics will track those. And again, I'm happy to help with UTMs if you need some help around that. And then get feedback from whoever you've touched so that you can continuously improve your processes. So that was a lot. And please don't feel that you have to do all of these things, or you have to do them in this order. I hope that there are ideas here and I'm confident that there are ideas here that will help you build or strengthen your volunteer relationships to help you drive your mission forward. And we have very little time left. Yikes, I'm sorry.
It's all right. We did have quite a few questions that did come through. So what I propose is I'll send you those questions, Bleema and Sarah. And if you can write out those answers, I'll be sure to include them in the follow-up email. How does that sound?
That's perfect. I'm sorry that I ran out of time.
No worries. A
You
lot of
can
great
also
information.
email me to talk more. I promise. I like to talk. Sorry.
All good. Well, thank you everyone for attending. This is the second of a third part series. So next week we are coming back. We're going to be talking about corporate engagement related goals. So please come back for that. Other than that, expect that follow-up email. If not tomorrow, then definitely by Monday with the answers to your questions. And that's all for today. Have a great rest of the day and see you all next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.